Hello and welcome. The day has gone, but the night has only begun. It's time to quiet the mind and soothe the soul. Let these peaceful images and the promise of renewal carry you into it. Section 1. The day had been a long, slow exhalation, a tapestry woven with threads of sunlight and the murmured threads of countless voices. You can almost feel it, even now, as you begin to let go of your own day, that gentle, weary warmth that follows a time of giving, of listening, of being present. Picture him, the teacher, standing by the great, shimmering lake of Galilee. The water, a vast sheet of liquid sapphire under the immense dome of the sky, caught the afternoon light and threw it back in a million glittering fragments. The crowd that had gathered on the gentle, grassy slope leading down to the water's edge was not a noisy, restless mob, but a sea of faces, each one turned toward him like a flower following the sun. They had listened for hours, their spirits drinking in the parables, simple stories of seeds and soil, of lamps and bushel baskets, of mustard seeds that held entire kingdoms within their tiny, sleeping hearts. His voice, steady and clear, had been the thread that held the day together, a melody woven into the rustle of the breeze through the reeds and the distant cry of gulls. And now, as the sun began its slow, majestic descent toward the western hills, painting the sky in washes of gold and apricot, a profound weariness settled upon his shoulders. It was not a harsh or bitter fatigue, but the deep, honest tiredness that comes from a day spent fully, from pouring out peace until the vessel is nearly empty. He stood for a moment, looking out over the water, his silhouette dark against the glowing sky. The last of the questions had been answered, the final blessing spoken. The crowd, full and satisfied, began to disperse, their voices soft and fading as they drifted back toward homes and suppers, carrying the seeds of the day's stories in the quiet soil of their hearts. The air itself seemed to sigh, the land settling into the gentle hush of approaching evening. This is the feeling we invite now, the feeling of a task completed, of a day well lived, of a gentle and deserved rest waiting just on the other side of the horizon. Section 2. As the last of the light bled from the sky, leaving behind a deep, velvety indigo in the east where the first brave stars were beginning to prick through, he turned to his closest friends. You can see them, these men, their own faces etched with a mixture of awe and exhaustion from the day's events. They were fishermen, men whose lives were dictated by the moods of this very lake, men who knew the scent of damp nets and the feel of a rough-hewn boat beneath their feet. "Let us go across to the other side," he said to them, his voice low, a soft sound in the growing quiet. It was not a command, but an invitation to leave the press of the crowd behind, to journey into the wide, open space of the night, to find a stillness that the busy shore could no longer offer. And so they moved together, a small, quiet procession down the gentle slope to the water's edge. The boats were there, pulled up onto the pebbled beach, their dark shapes resting against the land like sleeping creatures. The air was cool now, carrying the clean, mineral scent of deep water and the faint, earthy smell of wet sand and fishing nets, weathered by sun and salt. There is a particular peace in this moment, in the simple, physical act of leaving one shore for another. There is no rush, no urgency. There is only the gentle lapping of the wavelets against the wooden hulls, a sound as rhythmic and soothing as a heartbeat. They pushed one of the boats out, the smooth, worn wood groaning softly as it slid from land into water, accepting its natural element once more. The boat rocked gently, a cradle upon the darkening surface. They helped him aboard, and he moved to the stern, to the place where a fisherman would often stand to steer or to mend his nets. There was a cushion there, a simple sack filled with perhaps dried grass or wool, a small promise of comfort in the vastness of the lake. He settled there, his weight causing the boat to shift almost imperceptibly, a quiet acknowledgement of his presence. This is the beginning of the journey, a slow, deliberate transition from the known to the unknown, from the day's clamor to the night's embrace. Section 3. With a few quiet, practiced movements, the disciples raised the single, square sail. The linen cloth, patched and faded, caught the last breath of the evening breeze, and the boat began to glide away from the shore. The sound of the water changed from a soft lapping to a gentle, persistent shushing as the hull parted the placid surface. They left the lights of the villages behind, small, golden pinpricks that twinkled and then faded into the immense darkness. Soon there was only the boat and the water and the sky. Above, the heavens had unveiled their full glory. The stars were not merely points of light here, far from the shore. They were a thick, swirling river of diamond dust, of cold, pure fire, arching from one black horizon to the other. The Milky Way stretched in a luminous, misty band, a silent, celestial pathway. The air was so clear you could feel the depth of the universe, a vast, peaceful emptiness that was not frightening, but profoundly calming. In the boat, a deep silence settled, broken only by the eternal sounds of the journey. The soft hush-hush of water against the bow, the occasional creak of a timber, the faint whisper of the wind in the rigging. The disciples sat, some perhaps leaning against the gunwales, wrapped in their cloaks, lulled by the boat's gentle, rocking motion. It was the kind of motion that speaks to a deep, ancient memory within us all, the rhythm of the womb, the rhythm of being carried, of being safe. And in the stern, he slept. His breathing was slow and even, a quiet counter-rhythm to the sounds of the lake and the sky. He had given so much, and now he was receiving, drawing in the deep, restoring peace of the night, held in the cradle of the boat, under the watchful eyes of the stars. This is the peace we seek now, the peace of being carried, of trusting the journey, of surrendering to the gentle rhythms of the night, knowing you are safe, you are watched over, you are not alone. Section 4. But the lake, like the human heart, is known for its sudden changes. It has its own spirit, its own breath, and it can turn from a placid mirror into a raging beast with shocking speed. Far to the north, over the distant, unseen peaks of the Golan Heights, a change was brewing. A pocket of cold air, a shift in the ancient winds. At first, it was nothing more than a sigh, a slight stiffening of the breeze that caused the sail to snap once, then fill more firmly. The disciples, men of the water, would have noticed it, their senses pricking. The gentle rocking of the boat became a more pronounced sway. Then, the sigh became a whisper, and the whisper became a moan. The wind, funneled down the steep valleys that cleave the hills, gathered its strength and rushed out over the water. It was not a gradual building, but a sudden, violent assault. The furious Euroclydon, the storm wind, was upon them. In moments, the serene surface of the lake was shattered. The stars vanished, blotted out by racing, ragged clouds. The gentle shushing of the water became a roar. The waves, no longer gentle swells, grew into great, black mountains of water, their crests torn into white, hissing foam by the shrieking wind. The boat was no longer a cradle. It was a toy, a nutshell, tossed between these liquid peaks and valleys. Icy spray, sharp as needles, stung the faces of the men. The world dissolved into chaos. A screaming, wet, violent darkness where the only reality was the next wave, the next gust, the desperate, losing fight to keep the boat from being swallowed whole. The peace of moments before was not just broken. It was annihilated, erased as if it had never been. Section 5. Inside the boat, chaos reigned. The disciples, seasoned fishermen who had faced storms before, were now gripped by a primal, gut-wrenching terror. This was different. This was a fury that felt personal, apocalyptic. The wind howled with a voice that seemed almost intelligent, full of rage and malice. The waves, like black, grasping hands, slammed into the boat, one after another, relentless and powerful. Icy water poured over the gunwales, sloshing around their ankles, then their knees, weighing the vessel down, pulling it deeper into the churning abyss. They worked frantically, muscles straining, bailing water with their hands, with any vessel they could find, but it was a futile race against the onslaught. The sound was deafening. A symphony of destruction composed of the wind's scream, the thunderous crash of the waves, the violent groaning of the wooden hull being tested to its very limits, and the shouts of the men, cries of effort and fear that were torn from their lips and scattered into the storm. Their world had shrunk to this single, desperate point. The next breath, the next wave, the next moment of survival. Fear, cold and sharp, flooded their veins, erasing all memory of the calm evening, of the teachings, of the miracles they had witnessed. In the face of this raw, natural power, their faith was stripped away, leaving only the animal instinct to live. And through it all, in the stern, a single, impossible point of stillness. He slept, on the cushion, wrapped in his cloak. He remained in a deep, untroubled sleep. The contrast was absolute, a mystery so profound it was almost an offense. How could he sleep? How could he be so oblivious, so peaceful, while they were facing annihilation? It was in this moment of absolute terror and desperation that they turned to him, their voices raw, shouting to be heard over the storm's cacophony. "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" The question was torn from a place of utter helplessness, a cry not just against the storm, but against the perceived silence of the one they believed could save them. It is a cry that echoes in the heart of every human chaos, the feeling of being abandoned in the midst of the storm. Section 6. The cry tore through the chaos, a raw human sound of utter desperation. "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" It was not just a question. It was an accusation born of terror, a plea flung from the very edge of hope. In the midst of the shrieking wind and the boat's violent lurching, their hands shaking from cold and fear, they turned to the one place they had left to turn. And in that moment, something shifted. It began not in the storm, but in the stillness at the stern. He stirred. There was no jolt, no sudden gasp of alarm. It was a slow, deliberate movement, as if emerging from a depth of peace so profound that even the chaos of the storm was a distant echo. He opened his eyes, and in the dim, chaotic light, through the stinging spray and the shadows of the panicked men, his gaze was clear, untroubled, utterly calm. He did not look at the towering waves as if they were a threat. He did not look at the howling wind as if it were a master. He looked upon it all as one would look upon a disturbance, a disruption in the natural order of peace. He pushed himself up, the simple movement causing the water at his feet to ripple. He stood, his balance perfect and unnerving on the wildly pitching deck. He did not shout to be heard. He did not strain. He turned his face towards the fury, towards the shrieking wind and the raging water, and he spoke. His voice was not loud, but it carried a quality that nothing in the created order could ignore. It was a voice of authority, not of volume. A voice of origin, not of reaction. "Peace," he said, and then, directly to the storm itself, as if speaking to a frantic child or a disobedient creature, "Be still." The words were simple. Silence. Be muzzled. And they were not a request. Section 7. The effect was immediate and absolute. It was as if the entire universe, which had been holding its breath in chaotic rebellion, suddenly let out a long, slow sigh and returned to its intended state. The wind, which had been a solid, screaming wall of force, simply vanished. Its shriek was cut off in mid-breath, leaving a silence so vast and so sudden it felt like a physical presence. The waves, which had been mountainous and furious, did not slowly subside. They collapsed. Their roaring energy was drawn out of them in an instant, and they sank back into the surface of the lake, not as a choppy sea, but as a sheet of perfect, polished glass. The transition was so swift, so complete, it was disorienting. One moment, the world was a maelstrom of sound and motion and imminent death. The next, there was nothing but a deep, profound, and breathtaking silence. The clouds began to part, as if gently pushed aside by an unseen hand, and the brilliant, cold light of the moon poured down, illuminating a scene of impossible tranquility. The lake reflected the moon and the re-emerging stars with such perfect clarity that it was impossible to tell where the water ended and the heavens began. The boat floated serenely, no longer lurching but resting gently on the mirror-like surface, the only ripples being the gentle, expanding circles from where the last drops of spray fell back into the water. The sail hung limp, no longer straining against its ropes. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic dripping of water from the boards of the boat back into the lake, each drop a tiny punctuation mark in the immense sentence of the silence. The The storm was not just over. It was as if it had never been. This is the peace that follows the command, the silence that is more than an absence of noise, but a presence of order, a return to the fundamental calm that is the true nature of things. Section 8. In the wake of that impossible silence, a new kind of awe filled the boat, one far deeper and more terrifying than the fear the storm had provoked. The disciples were frozen, not in panic now, but in wonder so profound it felt like fear. They stood or sat or knelt in the water that still sloshed around the bottom of the boat, their bodies remembering the violent motions of the storm, but their senses reporting only in preternatural calm. They looked at the water, flat and serene. They looked at the sky, now clear and starry. They felt the utter stillness of the air on their wet, cold faces. And then, as one, they turned their gazes to him. He was still standing in the stern, his form now bathed in the cool moonlight. He looked the same, and yet entirely different. The man who had been sleeping on the cushion was the same man who had just spoken to the primordial forces of chaos and been obeyed. The reality of what they had just witnessed began to sink into their souls, not as a concept, but as a shivering, awful truth. They had called to him to help them bail, to grab a rope, to share in their panic. He had not shared their panic. He had simply ended it. He had not calmed them so they could face the storm. He had calmed the storm itself. The question now was no longer, do you not care? But, who then is this? Who is this that the wind and the sea, the untamable, unpredictable powers of nature, listen to him? Who is this who carries such authority in his very voice that creation itself must fall silent at his command? The fear they felt now was a holy fear, the kind that comes not from the threat of destruction, but from the overwhelming presence of a power so great, so fundamental, that it redefines your understanding of the world itself. Section 9. He turned his gaze from the peaceful expanse of water and looked at them. His eyes moved from one face to another, seeing their wide-eyed wonder, their trembling hands, the awe that held them captive. There was no reproach in his look for their panic, no boastfulness in his demeanor for his miracle. Instead, there was a gentle, probing question, meant not to shame but to guide them inward, to the source of their own turmoil. "Why are you so afraid?" he asked them, his voice soft now in the immense quiet, yet carrying perfectly in the still air. "How is it that you have no faith?" The questions hung in the air, mingling with the moonlight. He was not asking about the storm. The storm was already a memory. He was asking about the storm inside them, the storm of fear that had raged so violently it had blinded them to his presence, to his peace, to the reality of who he was in the boat with them. He was pointing them to a different kind of anchor, one that held fast not in the absence of tempests, but in the midst of them. The true miracle he was offering was not just a calm lake, but a calm heart. A heart that could sleep in the stern while the world screamed. A heart that could trust the one who journeyed with them, even when the journey led through the heart of the chaos. His questions were an invitation to a deeper faith, a faith that is not a fragile shield against trouble, but an unshakable foundation that remains standing when everything else is being shaken. It was an invitation to know, in the very core of their being, that his presence was the ultimate peace, a peace that could override any circumstance. Section 10. And so, the journey resumed. But it was not the same journey. The boat continued its passage across the lake, but now it moved through a world that had been sanctified by silence. The gentle lapping of water against the hull was a sweet melody. The slow, rocking motion was a comforting lullaby. The vast canopy of stars overhead was a testament to the order and beauty that had been restored. The disciples slowly began to move again. They set about the tasks of bailing out the remaining water, of checking the boat, their movements slow, thoughtful, reverent. They spoke little, if at all. What words could possibly encompass what they had just experienced? Their minds were replaying the sequence, the terror, the cry, the awakening, the command, the silence, not as a memory of disaster, but as a revelation. They looked at him often, not with the familiarity of a traveling companion, but with the awe of those who have glimpsed a profound and terrifying mystery. He had settled back into his place, but he did not sleep. He sat, perhaps, looking out over the water, a quiet, steady presence in the center of the newfound peace. The rest of the crossing was made in this holy hush, a silence that was filled not with emptiness, but with the afterglow of power and the gentle, patient presence of the one who commanded it. They were moving toward the other side, toward whatever awaited them there, but they were changed. They had learned that the storms without are fierce, but the peace within, his peace, is fiercer still. And as the dark outline of the distant shore began to rise against the starry horizon, they carried with them the memory of the silent storm, a lesson written not on scrolls, but on the water and on their hearts. Section 11. The boat's prow finally, gently, kissed the shore of the other side with a soft, grinding sound of pebbles and sand, a whisper of arrival after the roaring tumult of the journey. The transition from the liquid, star-reflecting realm of the lake to the solid, sleeping earth of the Gerasene shore was seamless, a gentle completion. The disciples moved with a newfound, almost ceremonial slowness, their actions deliberate and quiet, as if they were in a holy place, which, they now understood, the entire world had become. They secured the boat, the rough ropes making soft, scraping sounds against the wood, tying it not just to a stone or a post, but to the firm foundation of this new, peaceful reality. They stepped out onto the land, their feet sinking into the cool, damp sand, a sensation that felt profoundly grounding, a reaffirmation of stability after the terrifying lurch of the waves. The air on this side of the lake was different. It carried the scent of wild grasses, of damp earth, of the dense, sleeping forests that climbed the hills beyond the shore. It was cool and clean, washing over their faces, still chilled from the storm's spray, like a balm. The moon, now high and brilliant, cast long, deep shadows from the rocks and scrubby trees, painting the landscape in monochrome silver and black, a world of quiet mystery. No one spoke. Words were still too small, too fragile to contain the immensity of what had transpired in the space between one shore and the other. They simply stood for a moment, breathing in the silence, feeling the solid ground beneath them, and looking back at the lake, which now lay as placid and innocent as a sleeping child, giving no hint of the fury it had so recently contained. It was a testament to the power that had quieted it, a permanent, visible sermon on the nature of his authority. The chaos was not merely suppressed. It was transformed, its energy dissolved back into the profound order from which it had momentarily strayed. And in this quiet landing, there is a deep lesson for us as we prepare to rest. That every journey, no matter how turbulent, has another side, a place of landing and of peace, and we are always being guided toward it. Section 12. He was the first to move from the shoreline, his footsteps quiet on the path that led up from the beach. The disciples followed, a silent, contemplative procession under the watchful stars. Their minds were not empty, but full, overflowing with the sensory echo of the event. They could still feel the ghost of the violent rocking in their muscles, a phantom memory that made the steadfast earth beneath their feet feel all the more precious. They could still hear, in the inner chambers of their ears, the stark contrast between the storm's scream and the silence that had supplanted it. A silence that was not mere absence, but a positive force, a palpable presence that had swallowed the noise whole. And they could still see his face, lit by the moonlight as he stood and spoke, not with strain, but with a calm authority that seemed to emanate from the very core of creation. They replayed his questions in their hearts. Why are you so afraid? How is it that you have no faith? The questions were not accusations that stung, but mysteries that unfolded, layer by layer, inviting them inward. They began to understand that the true battle had not been on the water, but within their own hearts. The storm had merely revealed the state of their inner world, a world that had defaulted to fear because it had not yet fully grasped the nature of the one who traveled with them. Their faith had been a fair-weather faith, strong in the sunlight of his teachings on the shore, but fragile and quickly swamped in the sudden darkness of the storm. He was calling them to a different kind of trust, a submarine trust, one that existed deep below the surface disturbances of circumstance, anchored in the unchangeable reality of his character and his power. As they walked, the rhythm of their steps, the cool night air, the scent of pine and dew, all began to work on their frayed nerves, not erasing the memory, but integrating it, weaving it into the fabric of their understanding. They were learning to rest not in the absence of storms, but in the presence of the one who rules them. Section 13. They found a place to rest a little way inland, a small clearing surrounded by ancient, gnarled olive trees, their silvery leaves shimmering in the moonlight. It was a natural sanctuary, protected and quiet. Without a word, they settled there, their bodies yielding to a deep weariness that was more than physical. It was the exhaustion of the soul that has been stretched to its limits and then bathed in a profound peace. They sat on the soft, dry grass, leaning against the trunks of the trees, or lay back to look up at the web of branches and stars. The adrenaline that had flooded their systems during the storm had long since receded, leaving behind a pleasant, heavy languor, a feeling of being utterly spent and yet completely safe. He sat among them, his presence a quiet center around which their swirling thoughts and emotions could slowly settle and find their rest. No one felt the need to break the silence with questions or discussions. The lesson was too fresh, too deep for words. It needed to be absorbed in the quiet, like water seeping into parched soil. They simply existed together in the aftermath, in the holy hush. The night sounds here were gentle and soothing. The rustle of a small creature in the undergrowth, the distant, melancholic call of a night bird, the soft sigh of the breeze through the olive leaves. These were the true sounds of the night, not the violent, artificial screams of the storm. They were the rhythms of a world at rest, going about its quiet business under the canopy of the moon. And in this clearing, under these ancient trees, the peace of the commanded silence began to seep from the lake into their very bones, from the event into their identity. They were no longer just men who had survived a storm. They were men who had witnessed the word of God calm a chaos, and in doing so, had felt a beginning of that same calm being spoken into the chaos of their own hearts. Section 14. As they rested in the clearing, the memory of the storm began to transform from a nightmare of terror into a tapestry of revelation. What had felt in the moment like random, malicious chaos now, in the light of the outcome, seemed to have a purpose. It was as if the storm had been a classroom, a brutal but effective teacher whose sole lesson was to reveal the identity of the one sleeping in the stern. They had known he was a rabbi, a teacher with astonishing wisdom. They had seen him heal the sick, their eyes wide with wonder at the compassion and power. But this was different. Power over sickness was one thing. Power over the blind, raging forces of nature was something else entirely. This was the power of the Creator over his creation. The wind and the waves were not just listening to a command. They were recognizing their Maker. The realization washed over them in waves as gentle and profound as the now calm lake. The same voice that had said, "Let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place," had just now said, "Peace, be still." They were in the boat with the one who had woven the universe into being. The one whose breath spun the galaxies and whose whisper set the boundaries for the sea was, moments ago, sleeping on a cushion, trusting them to steer the boat. The profound humility of that, coupled with the undeniable immensity of his power, created a sense of awe that was almost too much to bear, and yet was the most comforting truth in the world. For if the one who commands the storm is with you, then what, truly, is there to fear? The storm, in its furious failure, had become the very thing that proved its own impotence in the face of his presence. It was a defeated enemy, its roar now just a memory that served to highlight the beauty of the silence that had followed. Section 15. Lying there in the clearing, looking up at the stars, the disciples felt the final remnants of their fear dissolve, replaced by a drowsy, overwhelming sense of safety. It was a safety not based on the promise of a storm-free life, for they were wise enough to know other storms would come, but on the unshakable certainty of who was in the boat with them. The boat of their lives, which could feel so small and fragile, was in fact carrying a priceless, powerful treasure, the presence of peace itself. They realized that faith was not about hoping he would prevent the storms, but about knowing he was sovereign over them. It was about learning to trust the peace in the stern, even when the waves were breaking over the gunwales. It was about hearing his question, "Why are you afraid?" in the midst of their panic, and letting it anchor them. as sleep began to gently pull at the edges of their consciousness. The boundaries between the lake, the clearing, and their own inner world began to blur. The gentle rocking of the boat on the now placid water became the gentle rhythm of their own breathing. The vast, silent sky above the lake became the infinite peace settling over their own minds. The steadfast, unmovable presence of the one who had commanded the silence became the foundation upon which their own rest was built. They were not just resting from a physical ordeal. They were resting in a person. They were learning the practice of ceasing, of letting go, of allowing the one who never sleeps to watch over them. And as they drifted into a deep, healing sleep, there was no room for nightmares of wind and wave. There was only the enduring, resonant echo of a single, spoken word that had rearranged the world: peace. And that word became the blanket that covered them, the lullaby that sang to them, the silent, unassailable fortress around their souls as they slept under the watchful, loving eyes of the stars and the one who had named each one. Section 16. Sleep, when it finally came to the disciples in that moonlit clearing, was not a mere shutting down of consciousness, but a deep, participatory immersion into the peace they had witnessed. It was as if the commanded silence of the lake had seeped into the very air they breathed, and now flowed in their blood, slowing their hearts and calming the last, subtle tremors of remembered fear that lingered in their hands and their breath. Their rest was profound, dreamless, and restorative, a sinking into the very foundations of the world that had been revealed as steadfast and good. They slept as he had slept in the boat, not out of ignorance of danger, but out of a profound, unassailable trust in a reality deeper than the temporary chaos. And as they slept, the world around them continued its own silent, gentle ministrations. The moon journeyed with infinite patience across the arc of the sky, its light shifting the patterns of shadow and silver on the grass around their sleeping forms. A soft dew began to form, jeweling the blades of grass and the leaves of the olive trees, a gentle, nightly baptism for the earth. The air grew cooler, encouraging the men to pull their cloaks tighter, nestling deeper into the warmth of their own rest. The coolness a comfort against faces that had been so recently lashed by stinging, storm-driven spray. In this sacred stillness, the memory of the storm was further transformed. It was no longer a thing of terror to be relived, but a conquered enemy whose defeat only served to highlight the profound and lasting nature of the victory. Their sleep was, in itself, an act of faith, a silent proclamation that it was safe to let go, safe to surrender control, safe to entrust the watch of the night to the one who had proven himself master of the night's fiercest elements. This is the sleep we are invited into now, a sleep that is not an escape from the world, but a sinking into the true, peaceful heart of it, a heart that beats in rhythm with a love that commands even the wind and the water. Section 17. As the first, faint hint of dawn began to dilute the profound black of the eastern sky, turning it to a deep, soft charcoal gray, the disciples began to stir. It was a slow, gentle awakening, devoid of the jolt and panic that so often follows a traumatic event. They opened their eyes to a world that was fresh and new, washed clean not by rain, but by peace. The events of the night before did not rush back upon them as a shock, but rather surfaced in their consciousness as a settled and solid truth, a bedrock reality upon which they now found themselves standing. They sat up, stretched stiff muscles, and looked around. The lake was now visible as a sheet of pale, pearlescent gray, smooth and silent, holding the pre-dawn light upon its surface like a precious offering. The air was cold and crisp, filled with the clean, hopeful scent of a new day. They looked at one another, and in the quiet glances exchanged, there was no need for words. A deep, unspoken understanding passed between them, a shared knowledge that they had passed through a threshold together and had emerged on the other side, fundamentally changed. They were a brotherhood forged not just in shared mission, but in shared terror and shared salvation. The ordinary acts of mourning, smoothing cloaks, running a hand through sleep-tousled hair, taking a drink of water from a skin, felt sacred, each movement a grateful acknowledgement of the simple, profound gift of a new day, a day they had, hours before, been certain they would never see. Their gratitude was a quiet, pervasive atmosphere, more felt than spoken. It was gratitude for the solid ground, for the still air, for the returning light, and most of all, for the quiet figure who was already awake, sitting and watching the dawn begin to paint the horizon with its soft, patient brush. Section 18. He was as he always was, yet now they saw him with new eyes. As the pale, golden light of the rising sun began to spill over the hills, it caught the edges of his form, outlining him in a gentle, fiery halo. He was looking out over the lake, his expression contemplative and peaceful. He was not a distant, untouchable monarch, but a present, accessible friend who possessed the authority of the cosmos. This was the paradox that was now settling into their hearts. His immense power did not create a chasm of fear, but rather a bridge of ultimate trust. Because he was so powerful, they could be utterly safe. Because he commanded the storm, they did not have to fear the storms. His question from the night, "Why are you so afraid?" now resonated not as a criticism, but as the most logical question in the world. With him in the boat, fear was the true irrationality. Faith was the only sane response. As the sun lifted fully above the horizon, flooding the world with its generous, golden light, it felt like a confirmation of everything they had learned in the darkness. The night had been a lesson in his power. The day was a lesson in his faithfulness. The light revealed the beautiful, detailed world in all its color and texture. The greens of the grasses, the silvers and grays of the olive trees, the brilliant blue of the now awakening sky. It was a world worth trusting because it was his world, and they were part of it, known and cared for within it. The storm was not denied. It was remembered within the context of this glorious, peaceful morning. A dark thread that, rather than spoiling the tapestry, served to make the golden threads of peace and deliverance shine all the brighter. Section 19. The journey back to the boat was undertaken in a different spirit than the journey from it. Where the night before had been a trek of stunned, holy awe, the morning was one of quiet purpose and integrated understanding. They walked with him, their steps in rhythm on the path, the sun warming their backs. The world was alive with the sounds of day, birdsong replacing the night bird's call, the buzz of insects in the fields, the distant sound of a shepherd calling to his flock. These were the ordinary sounds of life, but they heard them now with extraordinary ears. The entire creation seemed to be singing a hymn of order and goodness, a hymn that had, for a brief time, been interrupted by a dissonant chord, but which had now returned to its true and beautiful melody. When they reached the shore, the boat was waiting for them, looking small and humble in the vast, sunlit expanse of the lake. It was just a boat again, a tool, a vessel, but it was also a sanctuary, a classroom, and a monument to the night's revelation. They pushed it out into the shallow water, the morning cool of the lake a sharp, pleasant contrast to the growing warmth of the sun on their skin. As they prepared to set sail once more, there was no hesitation, no lingering trauma as they looked out at the deep water. The lake was just a lake again, a body of water subject to winds and weather, but it no longer held any ultimate terror for them. They knew now what and who was greater than the lake. They knew that the same presence that had filled the boat in the storm would fill it now in the calm, and that his presence was the only constant, the only true safety, in a world of variables and changes. Section 20. As the sail caught the gentle morning breeze and the boat began to glide out onto the placid, sun-dappled water, a profound sense of closure and a hopeful sense of beginning settled over the disciples. They were returning to the other side, to the crowds, to the demands and the mysteries of their journey with him. But they were returning as new men. The memory of the storm was now a settled part of them, a well of confidence from which they could draw in future moments of fear. They had not just been saved from drowning. They had been saved for a new kind of life, a life of deeper faith. They had learned that peace is not a passive state of circumstantial calm, but an active, resilient trust that can be cultivated in the heart, a trust rooted in the unshakable character of the one who journeys with us. The rocking of the boat, which had been a sensation of terror, was now a familiar, soothing rhythm, a physical reminder that they were moving, always moving, with him. They watched the shoreline recede, not with anxiety, but with a quiet confidence, their faces turned toward the future, whatever it might hold. And as the boat carried them forward, cutting a smooth, silent path through the water. They carried the silence of the storm with them, not as a void, but as a fullness, not as an end, but as a beginning. The peace that had been spoken to the wind and the waves had been spoken into their own souls, and it was a peace that would now travel with them, a silent, steadfast companion for all the journeys yet to come. And this is the peace that is available to you now, as you drift towards sleep. A peace that has been tested in the chaos and proven victorious. A peace that speaks into your own storms and whispers, even now, be still. Section 21. The return voyage across the Lake of Galilee was a journey through a different element than the one they had traversed in the night. The water, which had been a black, roaring abyss, was now a vast expanse of liquid light, a shifting, shimmering plain of mercury and sapphire under the generous eye of the morning sun. Each dip and rise of the boat was no longer a violent lurch toward doom, but a gentle, rhythmic sway, a cradle-like motion that seemed to sync with the slow, steady beating of their own hearts. The breeze that filled their sail was not the shrieking, malevolent force of the Euroclydon, but a warm, benevolent breath that pushed them steadily and kindly toward home. They moved in a companionable silence, each man immersed in his own contemplation, yet bound together by the shared, unspoken truth that lay between them like a treasured, weightless cargo. They watched the water, mesmerized by the way the sunlight fractured into 1,000 glittering diamonds on the surface, by the way the boat's wake unfolded behind them in a long, peaceful V-shaped trail that slowly smoothed back into the seamless whole. They watched the sky, where a few high, wispy clouds drifted lazily, no longer racing in panic but suspended in the blue vastness like thoughts in a mind at rest. And they watched him. He sat, as he often did, in the stern, but his posture was different. There was no cushion of sleep now, but a posture of wakeful peace. His gaze resting on the horizon, on the water on them with a quiet, encompassing awareness. He was not a passive passenger, but the still center around which the journey, the lake, and their very lives now gracefully orbited. The disciples found that they could look at the deep water without a clench of fear in their stomachs. They could feel a stronger gust of wind without their hands instinctively tightening on the gunwales. The memory of the storm was there, but it was now framed, contextualized by the overwhelming reality of the calm that had overcome it. It was like remembering a nightmare from the safe and solid perspective of a sunlit morning. The fear was a ghost, its power broken by the dawn. This journey was becoming a lived experience of integration, a slow, gentle process where the terror of the night was being woven into the golden tapestry of a new and unshakable confidence. The boat was no longer just a vessel of wood and rope. It was a sanctuary of practiced peace, a classroom where the lesson of the silent storm was being absorbed not just into their minds, but into their very muscles and bones, into their breath and their heartbeat. Section 22. As the familiar shoreline of Capernaum drew nearer, its white buildings gleaming like scattered shells in the distance, a new and subtle understanding began to dawn within the disciples. They realized that the true test of the miracle was not the storm itself, but the return to the ordinary. It is one thing to witness a universe-altering power in the midst of a crisis. It is another to carry the resonance of that power into the mundane, demanding rhythms of daily life. They were sailing back toward everything they had left. The crowds that would press in with their desperate needs, the religious leaders with their trick questions and skeptical stares, the dusty streets, the simple tasks of procuring food and finding rest. The world waiting for them had not changed, but they had. And the question that hung in the quiet air was whether this newfound peace was a temporary state, a spiritual high that would fade under the relentless sun of ordinary time, or if it was a permanent shift, a new lens through which they would view everything. As they contemplated the approaching shore, they understood that faith was not meant to be a flame that blazed only in the windstorm, but a steady, enduring ember that could glow through a long, cold night and be ready to ignite the morning fire. The miracle on the lake was not a one-time rescue to be remembered with nostalgia. It was a down payment on a new way of being. It was an invitation to live with the same trust in the crowded marketplace as they were now feeling in the center of the calm lake. He had calmed the outer storm to teach them how to calm the inner ones, the storms of anxiety about tomorrow, the tempests of pride and ambition, the squalls of anger and resentment. The growing buzz of life from the shore, the distant sounds of voices, the braying of a donkey, the smell of cooking fires, was not a threat to their peace, but its next assignment. They were being sent back into the world, not as they were, but as carriers of the silence, as living, breathing monuments to the fact that in the midst of any chaos, there is a voice that can speak and a peace that can answer. Section 23. The boat slid gently against the wooden pier in Capernaum with a soft, final bump. A quiet full stop to the journey that had begun in sunlight, descended into terror, and emerged into this profound, lasting serenity. The familiar sounds of the harbor washed over them. The cry of fishmongers, the creak of pulleys lifting nets, the splash of oars, the laughter of children playing by the water's edge. It was a symphony of ordinary life, and for a moment, the disciples simply stood in the boat, listening, allowing the two realities, the memory of the supernatural silence and the presence of the natural noise, to coexist within them. And then they stepped out. Their feet on the solid planks of the dock felt like a reaffirmation of their mission. They began the work of securing the boat, coiling the ropes, lowering the sail. These were the same tasks they had performed 1,000 times before, but today each action was infused with a new mindfulness. Tying a knot became an act of securing peace. Coiling a rope became a symbol of gathering one's thoughts in order. There was no frantic rush. They moved with a deliberate, almost graceful slowness, their inner calm governing their outer movements. People began to recognize them, and him and a murmur went through the crowd. Questions were called out. "Rabbi, where have you been? Tell us a parable." The demands of the world immediately began to press in, like waves against a shore. But the disciples found, to their quiet astonishment, that the pressure felt different. It did not create the same internal panic, the same feeling of being overwhelmed. The memory of the storm was a buffer, a deep reservoir of calm they could draw from. They could look at the pressing crowd and, in their mind's eye, see the waves collapsing into stillness. They could hear the cacophony of voices and, in their heart's ear, hear the echo of the commanding silence. They were learning that the peace he gave was not a fragile bubble to be protected from the world, but a resilient force that could be carried into the world, a leaven that could quiet the chaos from the inside out. As they moved through the crowd, making a path for him, they did so not with grim duty, but with a quiet, steady confidence. They were the ones who had been in the boat. They were the ones who knew what lay beneath the surface of the waves, and more importantly, who stood upon the water. Section 24. Later, as the afternoon sun cast long, deep shadows across the streets of Capernaum, the disciples found moments of solitary and shared reflection. Peter, perhaps, sat on a low wall, mending a net, his strong, calloused fingers working the needle and line with a practiced rhythm. As he focused on the intricate weave, his mind returned to the feel of the rope in his hands during the storm, the burning sensation of it tearing through his palms as he fought to hold on. Now, the same hands worked a delicate repair, their movement steady and sure. The memory was no longer a source of pain, but a point of reference for the peace that had followed. John, maybe, leaned in the doorway of a home, watching the people pass. He saw the worry on a mother's face, the argument between two merchants, the weary slump of a laborer returning from the field. And he saw these things not with judgment, but with a new compassion, because he understood the unseen storms that raged in every human heart. He had felt one himself. He knew the desperation of the cry, "Do you not care?" And he now knew, with a certainty that shook him to his core, the answer that came not in words, but in a power that rearranged the universe. Matthew, the former tax collector, might have looked at the ledger and coins on his table, symbols of a world of calculation and control, and felt a strange detachment. The anxiety that had once driven him to accumulate was quieted. What was there to fear when the one who controlled the currency of the winds and the waves was his friend? They began to talk in low murmurs as they worked. "Do you remember the sound?" one would say. "The silence," another would answer, not as a word, but as a breath, a holy name. They were not just recounting an event. They were reinforcing a reality, building each other up in this new faith. Their shared experience became a foundational story, a touchstone they could return to again and again, a story that grew not in exaggeration, but in depth and meaning each time it was remembered in the light of their ongoing lives. Section 25. As evening descended once more upon Capernaum, painting the sky in shades of rose and violet, a deep, fulfilling weariness settled over the disciples. It was the good tiredness that comes not from frantic activity, but from a day lived in alignment with a profound truth. The crowds had eventually dispersed. The questions had been answered, the teachings given, the sick comforted. Through it all, the peace had held. It had been a day of practicing the silence learned on the lake. Now, in the quiet of the evening, the memory of the storm felt like a dream from a distant lifetime. Yet its lesson was more vivid and immediate than the fading light. They gathered for a simple meal, the shared bread and fish tasting of more than mere sustenance. It tasted of gratitude, of fellowship, of a journey shared and a salvation witnessed. He was with them, and his presence at the table was the same presence that had been in the stern of the boat, accessible, quiet, and radiating the same unspoken assurance. When he broke the bread and gave thanks, the action felt charged with new meaning. This was the one who broke the power of the storm. This was the one who provided the calm. And as they ate, they felt a safety that had nothing to do with locked doors or quiet surroundings. It was the safety of being known and loved by the one who held ultimate authority. Later, as they prepared for sleep on mats, in a quiet room, on a roof under the stars, the fear of the night that had once lurked in the shadows of every mind was gone. The night was no longer a time of unknown terrors, but a canopy of rest, a reminder of the great silence that had swallowed the storm. The gentle lapping of the lake against the shore, a sound that had once been the prelude to chaos, was now a lullaby, a perpetual whisper of peace, be still. As they closed their eyes, their breath slowing, their bodies sinking into rest, they did so not with a prayer of desperate pleading, but with a quiet affirmation of trust. They were learning to sleep in the storm, not because the storms of life were over, but because they had found, in the one who journeyed with them, a peace that the world could never give, and therefore could never take away. And this is the invitation that extends to you now, in the growing darkness of your own evening, to lay down the frantic bailing, to cease the straining against the wind, and to simply rest, held in the unwavering peace of the one who speaks, and the chaos listens. Section 26. In the days that followed, the lake remained a constant teacher, its lessons written not in parables of speech, but in the silent language of light and water. The disciples returned to their work upon it, their fishing boats becoming floating chapels where the memory of the storm was a living scripture. In the pre-dawn darkness, as they cast their nets into the black, glassy water, they would sometimes pause and listen to the absolute silence, a silence that now felt friendly and full, rather than empty and foreboding. The splash of the nets was a rhythmic prayer, the creak of the boat a familiar hymn. When the sun would rise, transforming the water into a blazing path of gold, it felt like a daily reaffirmation of the victory of light over darkness, of order over chaos. They learned to read the signs of the weather not with anxiety, but with a detached, practiced wisdom. They could see a line of dark clouds gathering on the horizon, feel the first shifts in the wind, and instead of a cold dread, they felt a quiet alertness, a leaning not into fear, but into the remembered peace. The lake, in its every mood, became a mirror of their own souls. On days when it was perfectly calm, their inner world felt serene, a direct reflection of the grace that had been given. On days when a brisk wind whipped up whitecaps, they felt not terror, but a sense of adventure, a knowledge that they could navigate such seasons because the fundamental reality of their safety was unchanging. They found that the peace he had given was not a static state, like a frozen pond, but a dynamic, living reality, like a deep, still current that flows undisturbed beneath the wind-rippled surface. Their work, their conversations, their very breathing began to sync with this deeper rhythm. The lake, which had been the stage for their greatest fear, had now become the sanctuary of their most enduring peace, a perpetual, liquid reminder that the same power that commanded the storm also sustained the calm, that the voice of creation was continually speaking order into the world and into their hearts, with every wave that lapped gently against the hull, with every star that reflected perfectly on the water's undisturbed surface in the deep of the night. Section 27. The profound peace they carried began to radiate outward, influencing not only their inner world but their interactions with the chaos of others. When a frantic father pushed through the crowd, his daughter at the point of death, the disciples no longer saw just a panicked man and a hopeless situation. They saw a small, human-sized boat being swamped by a storm of grief and fear, and they found within themselves a new capacity to be a calm presence, to make a path for him to the one who could speak peace into that personal tempest. When the arguments and tensions arose among themselves about who was the greatest, the memory of their shared helplessness in the boat and their shared salvation acted as a gentle, humbling corrective. The storm had leveled them all, and the peace had saved them all. There was no hierarchy in the lifeboat. This shared experience became the bedrock of their community, a bond stronger than blood or background. They began to understand that the miracle on the lake was not just for them, but a demonstration of a universal principle, a key to the kingdom of God. This kingdom was not a distant geographical place, but a present, accessible reality, a realm where the authority of God's peace could override the chaos of any circumstance, whether a physical gale, a sickness of the body, or a storm in the soul. They were learning to be ambassadors of this kingdom, carriers of this silent, potent peace. Their role was not to conjure the power themselves, but to point to the one who possessed it, to lead the storm-tossed and the fear-ridden to the one who slept in the stern, to the one who could stand and speak a word that would change everything. Their own faith, once so fragile, was being tempered into a sturdy vessel, capable of holding this peace and sharing it, a cup that could be filled to overflowing from the infinite well of his calm. Section 28. As time flowed on, like the ever-moving yet ever-constant river that fed the lake, the memory of the storm did not fade. Instead, it became integrated into the very core of their identity, a foundational narrative that shaped their understanding of God, the world, and themselves. It was the story they told around evening fires, not with dramatic flair, but with the quiet reverence of men speaking of a holy thing. They would recount the details, the growing weariness of the day, the surprising invitation to cross over, the eerie beauty of the stars before the tempest, the shocking suddenness of the wind, the taste of the lake water, the burning in their muscles, the deafening roar, and then the voice. They would always pause at that part. The voice. It was indescribable. It was not the volume, but the quality. A sound that seemed to come from before time, a word that carried the weight of creation within it. And then the silence. They would try to describe the silence, but words always failed. It was a silence you had to have been inside to understand, a silence that was more a presence than an absence. In the telling and retelling, the story became a liturgy, a sacred ritual that reinforced their faith and invited others into its reality. For the new followers who had not been in the boat, hearing the story from the lips of those who had was the next best thing. It planted a seed of hope in their own hearts, a hope that the chaos they faced in their own lives, the Roman oppression, the personal failures, the internal struggles, was also subject to that same voice. The story of the silent storm became a cornerstone of the good news, a powerful testament that the God they served was not a distant, unmoved deity, but a present, powerful Savior who enters into the storm with them, and who possesses the ultimate authority to bring it to an end. This story, born in terror and matured in peace, was now a gift to the world, a beacon of hope for all who found themselves in any kind of boat, on any kind of stormy sea. Section 29. Now, as you lie in the quiet of your own room, let this story settle over you not as a distant tale, but as a present truth for your own spirit. The journey in the boat is a metaphor for every journey, for every life. We all set out in the calm of day, only to find ourselves, sooner or later, caught in a furious squall we did not anticipate and cannot control. The wind of anxiety howls, the waves of fear crash, and the cold water of despair threatens to swamp our fragile vessel. We bail frantically with our own strength, we strain at the oars of our own willpower, and we cry out into the seeming darkness, "Do you not care that I am perishing?" And now, in the deep quiet of this moment, hear the invitation to see your own situation through the lens of that boat on the Galilee. See him there, in the stern of your own life, in the very center of your anxiety, your grief, your uncertainty. He is not alarmed. He is not panicking. He is resting in a peace so deep, so foundational, that your storm is, from his perspective, already overcome. He is waiting for your cry, not to condemn you for your fear, but to reveal to you the reality of his presence and his power. The same voice that spoke to the chaotic winds and waves speaks now to the chaotic tempest within you. It speaks not from a distance, but from within the boat, from within your very circumstance. It speaks the same word, peace, be still. It is a word that does not negotiate with the storm. It commands it. It is a word that does not merely calm the surface, but reaches into the very roots of the chaos and unravels it, returning your inner world to its God-intended state of order and rest. Let this word wash over you now. Feel it penetrating the noise of your thoughts, the churning of your emotions. Feel it speaking to the core of your being, where your true identity resides, untouched by the storms of life. This peace is not your own creation. It is a gift. It is his peace. It is the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, and it is offered to you now, to guard your heart and your mind in Christ Jesus. You do not have to manufacture it. You only have to receive it, to trust in the one who gives it. Section 30. And so, we come to the end of our story, and to the beginning of your rest. Let the images gently dissolve now. The boat, the lake, the stars, the disciples. Let them fade into a soft, warm darkness. All that remains is the essence, the truth at the heart of the tale. That there is a peace that is stronger than any storm. This peace is now your companion, your atmosphere, your reality. Feel the weight of your body fully surrendering to the support of your bed. Feel each breath becoming slower and deeper and more peaceful. With every exhalation, release any lingering tension, any final remnant of the day-owned storms. Release the need to control, the need to understand, the need to strive. You are in the boat, and he is in the boat with you. You are safe. You are held. You are loved. The one who watches over you never slumbers nor sleeps, yet he invites you into the deep, healing slumber of those who know they are utterly secure. Your breathing is the gentle lapping of water against the hull. Your heartbeat is the steady, rhythmic creak of the boat, rocking on the deep, sure foundation of an everlasting peace. There is no storm that can disturb the depths of this silence. There is no fear that can withstand the power of this calm. You are floating on the ocean of a love that commanded the chaos and was obeyed. So let go, sink down, drift away into the wide,